StoryTime.
The Pied Piper of Hamelin. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a small town with a big problem. Hamelin was a lovely place in the rolling hills of the German countryside. One Saturday morning, as the clock struck 11, a meeting began in the town hall. Everyone was there. The shopkeepers, teachers, families, friends and neighbors, everyone had gathered to find a way to solve their problem. You're probably wondering what this problem might be. I'll tell you. Rats, big brown hairy rats, with long pink tails, as thick as your fingers, not just a few here and there, mind you, but thousands and thousands of them. Now, as you may know, rats are very clever creatures, and when they find somewhere they like, they tend to stick around. Well, unfortunately, for the people of the town, the rats liked Hamelin very much. Order, order! Wilfred Schnaps was the town clerk. A small chap with a surprisingly loud voice. Order, I say. Please be seated, so the mayor may commence this meeting. Thank you, Snaps, said the mayor, getting to his feet. He was a squashy, round gentleman with a pointy wax mustache. I hereby call to order this meeting. Let us begin with the minor issue of the rats. At the mayor's words, the hall exploded into noise and Wilfred Schnaps had to stand on his chair, waving his arms above wildly to settle the good people of Hamelin back to their seats. Once they had calmed and sat down, the mayor pointed to an orange-haired lady in the front row with her hand up. Yes, Frau Dango. Minor issue, she said crossly. My house is full of rats, so is my shop. There are rats in my garden, in my kitchen. I went to run a bath last night, and guess what I found? A rat, said the mayor sheepishly. 7 rats, said Frau Dango. A whole blooming family there, in the tub. The mayor shook his head and tuttled loudly. Terrible business, I can only imagine. Exactly. Well, this is the problem, Mayor, said Frau Dango, getting angrily to her feet. You have no idea what it's like for us down in the town. You're fine and dandy, up in the Hauptstrasse. The mayor was lost for words. His mouth was opening and closing, like a goldfish, but no words were coming out. So, said Frau Dangle, pointing her finger to the little man. What are you going to do? The townspeople shared an agreement. Suddenly, there was an awful, screeching sound at the back of the hall. Everyone turned to see where it was coming from, and many covered their ears. Hidden in the half-shadows stood a tall man in bright red and gold clothing, wearing a small leather knapsack. It was this curious individual who made the screeching noise. He removed his fingernails from the blackboard, and the noise stopped. There was silence, apart from a few whispers. On his head, he wore a jubbed-pointed hat, with a single green feather in his hand. There was a wooden flute, with mysterious markings. All eyes were upon him. He lifted his head to reveal pale, pointed features. Both sides of his mouth were slightly upturned, as if he were just about to smile, but not quite. I'll rid you of your rats, he said, walking forward. The mayor cleared his throat. This is a town meeting. Sir, I am or not, said the piper, shrugging his shoulder. But it seems to me that you are in a spot of bother. The mayor looked to Wilfred Schnaps, who had nothing to say, and raised his eyebrows instead. Let the piper speak. It was the voice of Rodangle, cutting the silence like a knife. The crowd voiced their agreement. I know rats, seen all kinds, he said. Look in the mayor in the eye. Not like this you haven't, said Wilfred Schnapps, shaking his head furiously. Maybe not this big, replied the piper, looking the mayor up and down. The mayor pushed back his chair noisily and stood up. Sir, said the mayor, I do not know who you are or where you come from, but this is a town problem, and I am dealing with it. I see, said the piper. There was mumbling and groans from the crowd. The mayor puffed his chest out and turned to the crowd. I am sorry, my good friends and neighbors, but this man clearly is wasting your time. Are you a troublemaker? Is that your game? My game, Your Honor, is to offer my services where they are needed most. If I'm not needed, then I shall be on my way. The piper turned to leave, which prompted a loud outcry from the townspeople. He stopped and turned back to the mayor, tilting his head slightly to one side. Silence. All eyes were on the piper. I will rid you of your rats for 500 pieces of gold, no more no less. At this the mayor laughed loudly. Piper, if you can do this, which I very much doubt, then I shall give you 4,000 gold pieces. The piper frowned. He was watching the mayor closely, and it made the mayor feel very uncomfortable. Well, do I have your word? Asked the mayor, dabbing the sweat from his forehead with a big purple handkerchief. 4,000, mayor. You have my word. Do I have yours? The mayor nodded. The man shook hands without another word. Piper lifted his wooden fluid to his lips, took a deep breath and blew. It was magical. The music made the cold air somehow warmer, a haunting melody that climbed up the scales and down again. The townspeople were transfixed by the joyful sound. Suddenly, there was a rumbling, clattering sound coming from well everywhere, and it seemed to be getting louder. The piper walked down the hall towards the main door, playing all the way. Mr. Schwartz, the local butcher, opened the doors, and the piper stepped lightly down the stone steps as the crowd watched him in wonder. They saw something shocking, yet wonderful. There, flowing into the town square with thousands and thousands of rats, they moved together like the ripples of a fast-flowing river. The rats surrounding the piper as he quickened his pace and skipped along the main road out of town. In a minute the townspeople were rat-free. But where had they gone? The piper piped and danced until he reached the great river to the south that divided Hamlin from huge wheat fields on the opposite side. He stopped at the water's edge and changed to a different song. On hearing it suddenly, the rats stopped following and instead ran headfirst into the river and were washed away. Only after the last rat was gone did the piper stop playing. Then, he placed the instrument in his small knapsack and walked along the dirt road back into Hammond town. Meanwhile, the people had gathered in the town square to celebrate. The local shops brought out food and drink, and the local musicians struck up a band and played as the townfolk danced and sang along. It was a joyous place. Once more, the piper enjoyed a few minutes of jollity that he had helped to bring, and Ferdangle spotted him and linked arms, spinning him around and round to the live music. He was handed all sorts of drinks and food and hugged and slapped on the back countless times. The piper smiled graciously as he made his way through the crowds up the large stone steps to the town hall. It was time to visit with the mayor and collect his just reward, and during the town hall, he could see that It was now empty apart from a single table at the far end, where the mayor and Wilfred Schnapp sat dining. A fine feast was laid out before them, and a great deal of it had dribbled onto the mayor's fine waistcoat. But did he care? He did not. Wilfred Schnapp noticed the piper first, and nudged the mayor in his round tummy. The mayor stood to welcome the piper warmly. "Come, my musical friend, drink with us, and be merry," he shouted. "Thank you, mayor, but it's time to be on my way," said the piper. "But first my reward, if you please." The mayor laughed. Wilfred Schnapp laughed too. The piper didn't. "Mayor, if you please, my time is short." The piper held out his hand to collect what he was owed. "Piper," said the mayor, chuckling, "let us be real. I know you're kind. What you did here today was mere a trick, conjuration, and something I could have done myself. These are country folk, and easily fooled, but I am a man of the world." Wilfred Schnapp gulped loudly. He looked at the piper, and then at the mayor, and his tummy tumbled nicely. The piper stood firm and nodded slightly. "I know rats," he said, "and it seems there is one rat in this town that did not drown in that river today." The mayor's smile had disappeared. He stood up and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Begone teeth away before I call the police. This is my town, and you, sir, are not welcome." The piper did not move. "So you refuse to pay me? Well, I am owed. You shall have nothing from me, not one piece of gold," said the mayor, poking the piper firmly in the chest with a fat, greasy finger. "And there is nothing you and your little pipe can do about it." The piper said nothing. He gave a tiny note, as if the decision had been made. He turned and walked towards the door. He took his wooden instrument from his knapsack in one swift movement and began to play. It was a different song this time, but just as beautiful. The mayor shouted over the music, "And don't come back," as the piper made his way down the steps. Everyone in the square fell silent, captivated by the beauty of the new melody. Then the strangest thing happened. From the houses came the children of the town, skipping and jumping in time with the beautiful music. The piper made his way through the town once again and out onto the main road. Once again he was followed, but not by rats. This time he was the children of the town who were mesmerized by his melodies. Shouts such as, "Where is he taking them?" and "All children stop him," echoed through the square, but they were frozen in place and helpless to stop it. A few hours later, the piper's musical magic finally wore off, and as soon as it did, the grown-ups flooded out of town along the road to search for their children. But the piper and the children were nowhere to be found. Days later, the children had still not returned. Those days turned into weeks and weeks into months. You may have guessed it, and I am sad to say it, but the children of Hamelin never came back, and the mysterious Pied Piper was never seen again. Wilfred Schnapp told the townspeople the truth about how the mayor had treated the Pied Piper, and the mayor was thrown straight into prison. The town people asked Schnapp to take over as mayor of Hamelin, which he did, but from that day on, it was a sad, quiet place, free from rats, of course, but also free from the joyful sound of children's laughter. If anything good can come from this story, it is that, from that day forward, in the quiet town of Hamelin, no one dared to break a promise, ever again. The end. Hope you have enjoyed the reading.